Your challenge, folks, is impact with your work, and you need to be storytellers. There is no two ways about it. You don't need to be a YouTuber, perhaps, or an Instagrammer or a Twitter person or whatever it might be, but you do need to think of these things because there is so much valuable information, I know, vaulted in the minds of very intelligent people doing brilliant work, but it often gets caught in this vacuous thing of only being shared by other people who care for what you care for. To make your thing to be seen by others that are not in your domain is your key challenge, and that's what you must do. Riparianism, if we are to share with people that rivers should be the domain of everyone and not of political agencies and of companies and of people who don't live on that river, for example, that is worth telling and it needs to be told, but we need to do it with sympathy as well, because no one's going to ever listen to you or me or anyone if we do it with animosity. So it's about finding your positivity in something that needs to be said.
Hi, I'm Cray with the International Water Training Institute on behalf of the Australian Water School. Welcome to today's webinar about river health. Now, today we're going to be talking about riparianism, which is a term that's going to need some more definition during our time together. But first of all, let's welcome all of our attendees from right around the world. We have got a truly international live audience with us today. Now, with that many people in that many places concerned about river health, maybe we should, that should give us a little bit more optimism about the future. Even though today's presentations will showcase some very bad rivers, which is actually the name of a YouTube series that's getting millions of views at the moment and really raising attention around river health. We will be joined soon by Beau Miles, the creator of that series. And we're also excited to be joined today by Brad Dalrymple, host of the Ocean Protect podcast, which, as I understand, just last week won the annual award for excellence in policy and education in Queensland. First of all, congratulations for your win. And I understand that Beau is a full-time YouTuber now. Is full-time podcasting in your cards, or are you going to keep your day job?
Well and truly, I'm hoping to keep my day job. Podcast is definitely just a hobby at this stage, but we have a lot of fun doing it. 5th year we're in now, 160 episodes down, but certainly having a lot of fun doing it.
Awesome. We're going to encourage all of our attendees to watch some more of those episodes. We'll hear from Brad here momentarily. Thanks for that, Brad. We are going to set the stage now for our first guest. And let's first talk about the word riparianism and why it's in the title of this webinar. So before we talk about whether we should be reversing riparianism, we need to work on defining riparianism. Look, our planet is in crisis, and like taking our pulse or our blood pressure, we can use our rivers as a metric of the planet's health. And you see here on this screen a few examples that we'll be talking about today. And these highlight some of the issues around our rivers: pollution, overuse. There's the Queen River that Beau will be highlighting, the Mekong River that Brad has covered in some of his podcasts that we've put as recommended viewing and watching, the Colorado, which we've covered in previous webinars. And here's one that hits home for me a bit. It's the Spree River in Berlin. Now, I grew up in a divided Germany back in the 1970s, and I used to take a train between East and West Berlin a few times. And for part of the border that forms there, it's the Spree River and not the iconic Berlin Wall. And I remember one time the military officers on the train, they warned us not to swim in that river because they were running a current through it to electrocute anyone trying to escape. Now, I'm not sure if that was true, but the need to keep kids out of the river was very real. And in fact, there was a memorial on the bank of the river where a kid about my age had jumped into the Spree to chase a soccer ball. He ran into some trouble, but the authorities who could have saved him, they actually watched him drown and they photographed it instead of saving him. And it's because they weren't allowed to cross this imaginary line in the river. Now, I understand that's a bit of a somber example, and I do promise we'll liven things up a bit, including the recreation of a Seinfeld episode, which we'll hear about soon. But what we do is serious business, and it's a delicate balance. Most of my career has dealt with rivers. That's my chosen field. Sometimes that involves trying to protect rivers from people, and at other times, it's about protecting people from the rivers. Now, both of those goals can be rewarding when we try to strike the right balance. But what's disheartening sometimes is when short-term profits get put ahead of everything else. And that can accelerate us toward more catastrophes like we see in the bad rivers that we'll cover today. It undermines not just river health, but human health and safety as well. And that could be very frustrating. When the US pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord a few years back, I felt a bit sick. It actually made me physically sick. Especially hearing the applause around that announcement. And I wanted to do something about it, but I didn't really have much of a voice at the time. And so writing tends to be my therapy. And I ended up writing up an article about how parochialism harms rivers. And I was looking for a title for my article. Now, riparian means rivers, right? So I settled on riparianism. I've dropped some of the isms that I used to subscribe to in life, but with a career focused on rivers, I thought surely riparianism is something I could stand behind. Because if environmentalism is action and concern about the environment, then wouldn't riparianism be concern and action aimed at protecting rivers? Only it's not, or it wasn't. When I looked it up, I was disappointed to find that the term had more to do with protecting the rights of riverfront landowners than protecting the rivers. And it does get much more complex than that. There are legal definitions that vary, and there's duties and responsibilities, not just the rights. But the original term is very parochial. And that didn't sit well with me, but I decided to call my article Riparianism anyway. And I just inserted my naive wishful thinking into an alternative definition. And so with $10 of hard-earned cash, I bought the domain name riparianism.com, stuck my article there complete with a made-up definition. And I thought that better suited my own philosophy. So this is the article, and that's not what riparianism means. At least it's not what it meant when I wrote the article. So let's check, did it work? Well, just yesterday, I asked Google to define riparianism for me. And sure enough, there it is. Now, you note the date. If you Google that date and the Paris Accords, you'll see the announcement that sparked this article to begin with. But to be sure, I went to AI. We seem to be relying on AI more and more lately. And here's Bing AI's response. And it'll give you the definition from Merriam-Webster first. But there you go. Have a look at that. I'll zoom in on that a bit. A belief that rivers should be managed in a manner that transcends property lines and political boundaries. Well, I have to admit, I made that up. And it's scary that that worked. I mean, who am I to define words? But this is a warning to always check your sources. They may be bogus. And it's also encouraging that we have the collective power to redefine outdated ideas and maybe do better than we did yesterday when we move into tomorrow. So when we've titled today's webinar, Reversing Riparianism, if we're defining it with the old parochial definition, I'm hoping we can undo that by not just defining it, but redefining it into something that we can all stand behind. So I've set up this accompanying website at hydroschool.org/riparian, and we've posted links to Beau's videos, to the research that Brad will be highlighting, his podcasts, a documentary on the Spray River incident that I mentioned, and some other resources. So that's my little soapbox. Now, last month here in Perth, I made my way to the packed Heath Ledger Theatre, and that's where Beau Miles was screening some of his new films to the sold-out crowd. And I managed to catch up with Beau there at the screening. And as I looked around at the audience and the colossal challenges that our rivers face, the ones that were highlighted in those films, well, I realized we're going to need a bigger soapbox. So enter Bad River. This is a 4-part series of films about rivers, which now has about 3 million views between the 2 episodes that are available online. Brad and Beau were both with us last year when we covered part 1 with Captain Moore. Check the website links for that episode. If you have not watched Bad River Part 2 yet, that's the one highlighted here, we'd invite you to do so. This one's in Tasmania. I love this photo, but it is disturbing. If you watch the video, you'll see some revolutionary eDNA science showing that this river is biologically dead. And we've covered eDNA in some of our earlier webinars this year. We will hit it again next year. But if that's our stethoscope, then we are in big trouble. So let's have Beau himself take us along on his journey today, including a sneak preview of what's coming in episodes 3 and 4 and some insights into how we can help. So we'll be taking some audience questions in the background, which Beau will address right after his presentation. And Beau, I guess I should say Dr. Miles, he was a professor until he struck out on his own as a full-time storyteller about 2 years ago. He's got a passion for the outdoors, including our rivers, as you see here. I hope you all subscribe to his channel because I guarantee you will be a better human for every episode that you watch. I've certainly found some tremendous value in the stories that Beau shares, especially those about parenting. Check those out as well. So Beau, welcome to the webinar. I understand your time with us is a bit limited today, but it is great to have you with us this morning. So if you can turn on your camera and get ready to say good day to our audience.
Thanks, Craig. Hello, everyone. That's a really sad story, Craig, about the river in Germany. I'm a father of 2 young girls, and to think that people would bystand and watch a boy drown is just tragic to me. And it says so much about as you said, the political nature of rivers and landscapes, and who has the right to do what, and who has the right to do, I suppose, good, bad, or otherwise to a river. And yes, I totally agree with you too. We always say that rivers are a great litmus test of the health of humanity, because everything ends up in the river and ends up then going out to sea. But we live on land, of course. We don't really live at sea. We live at sea on small little pockets of land that we take with us through great engineering and vegetable gardens that are on land, etc. And so, yeah, the river, it means so much as a metaphor for our life, doesn't it? That is very sad. And in a sense, it triggers exactly why I decided to make this series, Bad River. And in particular, this episode, it's a 4-part series. And I've talked to you folks before about my initial episode, which was paddling down Cooks River in Sydney, which is considered one of the worst urban rivers, or the most polluted rivers in urban Australia. That's Cooks River in Sydney. Whereas this river here you're looking at now, this is the Little Glover Creek. The orange part is about to flow into the Queen River in Tasmania. Tasmania is synonymous for wilds and biodiversity that's off the charts. And so I'll focus on this second river for this presentation. The other 4 you can see there, I tried to choose really different, diverse rivers across Australia, just to get a feel for the gigantic landscape that is Australia. And I suppose 4 very different problems. One is a problem from mining, one is a problem from urbanisation and runoff and hard surfaces. One is ancient and is being affected by not the local population, but climate change, as are they all, really. And then the Murray River, which is down on Victoria, down on the south there, our largest river network, is being affected, in a sense, by everything. Yeah, this first river that was the Cooks River, this really did strike me home, but just like your story of the river in Germany, it all came about when I decided finally as a 36-year-old to follow my boyhood river all the way to the sea. It's about a 45-kilometre river, 30 miles or so. And I always thought my local river was healthy. And it turns out after 4 days of toil getting down this river, it is anything but healthy. And it's very much a dumping ground. Cattle are grazing through it. It is full of noxious weeds. It's been altered. The course of it's been altered. It's bolt straight for the last 15 miles. So I popped out the other end to change. Man, my worldview was utterly affected. And this is where it all came from. Here's a section of the canal. This is a relatively healthy section, but a lot of those things you see in the picture shouldn't be there as well. Yeah, here's me reinventing. It's very rare. As a filmmaker, I often have eyes on me from a drone or my own camera looking at me, and I can pinpoint almost moments in my life that shift my worldview, and here's one of them. Where things are changing. There's the little red kayak as I spit out to sea. It was a bonkers journey, this one, and much harder than I thought. And it sort of harked back to old forms of exploration too. I tried not to go to Google to fill in the gaps for me. I wanted to learn by experience, which is, I suppose, what my expertise at university was, experiential learning. Thanks, Cray. So this is still in the Cooks River, which I presented to you folks 6 or 8 months ago. The fact that this is a river beggars belief too. It makes perfect sense from a management perspective, I suppose, for these so-called new civilizations. We don't want these areas to flood. We don't want that house up there on the top right to have water coming through its floorboard. So let's make this thing a canal which shoots through water. It rains and it's gone within 2 or 3 hours. It doesn't stick around. It doesn't soak into the soil. It doesn't do its thing. Here's the Cooks River as well, a kilometre section underground. Remarkable. I do wonder about the folly of these. Brad knows a lot about this sort of stuff. I do not. I'm not an expert in a lot of the science that I touch on or look at or comment on in some of my films. And I say that I'm very transparent about that. I'm not an expert. I am not, but I am a human that still buys plastics. So when I go down and I see plastics in some of these things, and I see a lot more of it not in these things, I think, gee, something has to change. My consumerism has to change, and so does our helping mechanisms around it. I always thought it's odd when you have pools that are close to the sea. This is only like 2 kilometres, 3 kilometres from the beach. I think that's odd about resorts sometimes too. This is just me shooting from the hip, folks. I often think it's weird when you go to a resort next to the beach and you go to the pool instead of the beach. So, look, I did very high level searching on this, as in just like Cray with his riparianism. Google is responsible for so much of our knowledge tree, isn't it? We have a question now and we go straight to something that is an online oracle. A lot of it's true, but a bloody lot of it's not as well. And so, look, I dug a little deeper to try and find the worst river in Australia. And the jury's out a little bit, other than to say that the Queen River in Tasmania was very much high on the list, based on a large mine that's been operating for about 120 years. It's in an area that's in the northwest of Tasmania, which is famous for its wilderness, for its Cumbrian 15-million-year-old forest, really dense, incredible forest, world-class, in fact. This is a World Heritage area, just not far from this. Here's me at the confluence of the King and the Queen River. And here's the problem. A giant mine that just kicked off in the 1880s and at one stage was the wealthiest copper mine in the world and was responsible for the entire, essentially, of Tasmania's GDP at a time in history. And of course, it started early enough for them to not have any of the environmental overlays that we try and instigate now. Here's me setting off from the top of the watershed. I'd seen on Google where a small creek goes down the side of this mine. And I don't know of mine rehabilitation and of the geology and the hydrology like many of you folks do. I'm just going down to see what I can see as a layperson. And it's remarkable just how much a layperson can take in a scene that they have no formal training in, what is good and what is bad. That alarms me, that essentially some bearded bloke who's an adventure type, who's kind of just at the fringes of... I'm in a midlife adventure crisis, you might say. And I can take in so much of what should and should not be happening in this scene. And there, in that lies, I think, huge problems. Thanks, Cray. Geez, I didn't spend much time on it, did I? That is the last image. I thought I had more images there, Cray.
There's a few more if you want to give us a little preview of what's coming up next. So we've gone through the first two, which are available on YouTube to watch, but then we've got these ones that are still coming up. If you want to give a little plug for what's coming.
Yeah, thank you. My mistake. I just thought I had a few more images of the Queen River to give people. But yeah, of the 4-part series, I go from this really bad river that makes me question what I'm doing as a filmmaker and as this adventure type and as this storyteller. And then I go to Central Australia for what's considered the oldest river in the world. 350, 400 million years old, this watercourse that runs in a very central location to the continent. So it hasn't had glaciation. It hasn't had a lot of the, I suppose, temperature variations of the fringe of the continent. And it is very old rock and a very old watercourse. And as a layperson going up here too, this is not my domain. I don't know what looks healthy or not. Unlike the Queen, where it's very obvious, the Cooks is very obvious. I'm either surrounded by rubbish or I'm surrounded by noxious, acidic water. In the centre of Australia, this place looks like a wilderness to me. And of course, it's not. It's full of buffel grass and there's camel and horses everywhere, and there's cattle, there's salinity. But you've got to look to see it, and you've got to know what you're looking for, in a sense. And so I felt a bit fraudulent on this river because I'm going down this very ancient watercourse as this bloke with Scottish lineage in the centre of Australia who lives on the coast of Australia, getting fried to a bloody crisp. And it was a hard story to tell, a very hard story to tell because of the lens of bad river, because the experience itself was magnificent. Which was just as well, actually, because I'd spent 2 films just thinking, gee, why am I subjecting myself to all this noxious rubbish and acidic water? So it was a really nice departure to then think, okay, the tragedy of this river is that it is being affected by temperatures the world has never seen, and it's not due to the people who live on the river itself. It has a tiny population who live mostly in small towns. The river itself, I found one beer can in 100 kilometres. So this place feels ancient. It feels very wilderness, feels very as though no one lives there. And of course, that's not true either. It has had custodianship for tens of thousands of years. Remarkable. So it was a really nice play on culture. My final river was descending a chunk of the Murray River, or the River Murray, which runs into the Darling and becomes, it's our largest network. It's one of the largest navigable rivers in the world. Certainly not by volume. It's tiny by volume, but it is quite long. 14th longest river in the world, the Murray-Darling system. I've guided on this river my whole adult life, so I know certain chunks of it very well, from gum trees to campsites to the level of the water to what you're going to catch in it to what bird life lives there. But amazingly, the lens I put over this trip was to eat only what comes from the Murray, which remarkably is about 30% of Australian food. And yet to go into a supermarket and to buy local food from this huge resource is very, very hard. So I basically ate oranges and drank a lot of wine and tried to make my own bread from wheat that we found on the side of the road. Otherwise, it just showed the gentrification of food and how our river, in a sense, had been gentrified too and just used for its water. And it comes back to that riparianism, how much water do you take? So this final episode is kind of an encapsulating episode of rivers and how this big, huge river, so famous in Australia and so responsible for so much of our food, is so torn in so many ways because of its political power. I just to be a bit odd, I thought I took a departure from the canoe and decided to go inland to try and find food on this scooter for a couple of days. It was very good fun, which mostly wine. So it was sort of this drunken scootering escapade. It was very good fun.
Awesome.
And that kind of wraps up the Bad River series, and that's in a nutshell. The defining natures of creating the series of Bad River was to, as someone who really loves the environment, and everything is the environment, from a concrete city to the wilds of the wilderness. When I say environment, I say a biotic environment where I'm getting feedback, or where I know that there is healthy ecosystems and there is biological life other than humans, or other than life that's been fiddled with humans. It was kind of, in a sense, to try and to have experiences and aren't in places that are healthy, which is to question your own space as a human and what you do and your consumerism and all of your choices you make with this. And essentially just to turn a spotlight on me and my kind, and how maybe there's a huge amount of interest in that, but I suppose to make myself accountable for it as well in this era of being a new father and someone who works for myself and as a storyteller who's looking for provocations. So that's where Bad River came from, and I think it's been a real it's been a heck of a journey and the hardest storytelling I've ever had to do.
Speaking of stories, do you want to make a plug for the upcoming book? How about that?
Well, yeah, Bad River, the book is coming out. I'm taking my sweet time finishing the first manuscript because I keep making films. But look, the book will be out mid next year, or going to plan. And that gives a fuller picture of the films themselves, and kind of, walks you through the outtakes and some of the fun moments, the hard moments, the reason behind things, and puts a bit more science from experts into it as well, and not just my take on it as a layperson going down these rivers all over the place. It's been one of the easiest things to write. So while the films have been incredibly hard to make because of the tone, the book has been much easier to write because it's lineal. I can sort of speak off the cuff, and I don't have to go looking for footage as such. When I'm writing, I can just write words that take me to that footage. And so it's been a hell of a project, and I look forward to finishing it.
Great. Now, let's get Brad to join us as well for a bit of a kind of a Q&A here. If I just have a quick look, and Beau's got to run up at the midpoint here, to get to another meeting, and we're grateful for the time that you've spent with us and for your storytelling. If you go watch Bad River 2 right now in the next probably few days, you may well be the 1 millionth viewer. So this is quite an audience. And again, think about the little soapboxes that some of us have, standing up, preaching to those who are within earshot. When you've got, almost 1 million subscribers and many millions of views for the series, there's a potential to make a difference here. And first question here from the audience, we'll just go with some that have been upvoted. The role that you think effective communication is playing in shifting the ways that we appreciate the world around us. Any thoughts on that? And then Brad, if you've got a question you want to pose to Beau, let's move into that one. So first of all, about the effective communication. I don't know if you saw that comment. It's a little longer in the Q&A line, but if you can just speak to that.
Yeah, well, it's a good question. Thanks everyone for these little claps that I'm seeing emerging from the bottom of the screen. That's great. It's probably the best question in light of who you are. Okay, there's 250 of you watching this bloke talk to you about rivers. I'm not a river expert. I'm not a riparian expert. I'm not really an expert on anything other than myself in some respects, and I'm very transparent about that. My PhD is on the lived experience, and to some degree, my PhD was things that we kind of know innately as well, but you have to write it down to make this volume of something. Your challenge, folks, is impact with your work, and you need to be storytellers. There is no two ways about it. You don't need to be a YouTuber perhaps, or an Instagrammer, or a Twitter person, or whatever it might be, but you do need to think of these things, because there is so much valuable information, I know, vaulted in the minds of very intelligent people doing brilliant work, but it often gets caught in this vacuous thing of only being shared by other people who care for what you care for. To make your thing be cared for, or to be seen by others that are not in your domain, is your key challenge, and that's what you must do. Riparianism, if we are to share with people that rivers should be the domain of everyone and not of political agencies and of companies and of people who don't live on that river, for example, that is worth telling, and it needs to be told. But we need to do it with sympathy as well, because no one's going to ever listen to you or me or anyone if we do it with animosity. So it's about finding your positivity in something that needs to be said.
That's great. That's a great way to put it. And as somber as the initial story I told was, we do have light notes as well. And while Brad is forming a question for Beau, I'll put up here a video that we definitely recommend you watch. When my sister and I my family moved to Michigan, they had just put this 10 cents, which is now 50 cents these days, 10-cent bottle redemption scheme in place. And Seinfeld took advantage of that with some of their episodes. I tried as well. My sister and I scoured landfills, and we got, I think it wasn't 10,000, but we had over 1,000 bottles. We tried to bring them back, and they wouldn't give us a cent for them because they didn't have the stamp on them. It was pre-deposit law. And so this is a real thing. And I guess, when we talked to Brad earlier about this bottle redemption schemes, you may want to just mention a little bit about that. And then, if you wanted to pose a question to Beau as well.
Oh, bottle redemption schemes. Yeah, look, but Beau pulls on my heartstrings when he starts making Seinfeld references. So, but yeah, look, the science is pretty clear. There was a CSIRO study back in 2018, I think, led by Chris Wilcox and Denise Hardesty and a few others, that showed that where bottle schemes are present, they see a significant reduction in single-use bottles in the environment. So I think they observed about a 40% reduction in littering rates just by having these container deposit schemes. So yeah, if you can make 10 cents or ideally more money out of each one you return, all the better. But yeah, look, to Beau's and yourself and your comments, Cray, like people, I don't think we're that biologically different to we were 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 years ago. We love stories. And Beau is a great storyteller. And I look at the sort of ways he does it. It's with passion, intelligence, honesty, and I think humor. And I think that really resonates and engages a lot of people. And that's why you see 1 million plus viewers on some of these YouTube clips, which is fantastic. But I guess the question I have for Beau would be, how do you start? Like you've got a whole bunch of passionate environmental warriors, planeteers, but how would you recommend they just take that first step and tell their story?
I have two circles, and this is a new metaphor I've cooked up to answer this question. I have two circles of influence, or two circles in my life. I have my local story, which is my own home. And it's pretty much, if I stand on my front porch and I look out on that front porch, if I can't see the lands from my front porch, then in some respects, they're not my lands to care for. I think of that as my local community, the people that live within that site. That's my local river. That's all my neighbors. That's where my parents live. That is where I must care for. That's where I teach my daughters the most things that they're going to learn in the first 10 years of their life. And it's where I can plant a tree and watch it grow. You know, it's very simplistic. That is my local sphere of influence. That's what I care for. That's what I get most impassioned about. The next level is my big circle, and that is something like what we're doing now. And that's what YouTube is. I can't care for a creek that's degraded in Michigan or running down through the Philippines or in Mongolia. I can't really care for it. There's only so much compassion I have, and that must be done by someone who lives on those rivers. All I'm doing is telling stories of metaphor, basically. Here's Beau giving a damn about his own area or his own creek or his own daughter, and just trying to be good to his own family because he knows he's a flawed human too. You know, I know I'm flawed and I'm trying to get better. And so I just want to make my small circle better. And then the larger stories reflect that as a theme. That is it. They're my two areas, because otherwise it's too intimidating. I can't fix climate change. I can't plant a tree that fixes climate change, but I can plant a tree that gives a magpie locally somewhere to live. So I just make it smaller. I make my area of influence smaller. And if you do have a big pond to put out there, something that's potentially impactful, great. Otherwise, don't sweat it.
Perfect, and that actually is a perfect response to the one of the other upvoted questions here about the local environment and local protection. And I know you need to run fairly soon, but if you could just have a look at that comment there, a couple more, and just offer any closing remarks before you run, and then we'll turn the time over to Brad.
Yeah, look, these are excellent questions. What I would say is, because I do have to run, I'm really transparent, and I'm a fast emailer. So Beau Miles film at Gmail, if you want to follow up at all. I'd be happy to answer your questions. Knowing too, folks, you're the experts here. I'm not. I'm just the guy that goes down and tries to put a simplistic lens over things to make it kind of palatable for the masses. That's kind of the plan. But yeah, the authenticity thing, I think, comes up by Rebecca. Yeah, we've got to be pretty raw with our storytelling, because it's compelling. It has provocation in it too when you're raw. People love to see flaws in other humans, but with humility. It's really quite terrific, you know. What an old James Bond's, and funnily enough, James Bond has only survived in the last 10 years as a film character because he's now flawed. You know, I think that's a wonderful thing. And so you try and put that into the trouble with something like research, for example, is research can't be flawed. And if it is, we have to say it. We say that this research is flawed because of X, Y, Z. But it's not, it's done in a way that is, it's written for the people who need to hear that. And so I struggle with the concept of research when it doesn't reach beyond its own core. And that's what I think it's a huge challenge. And I know it is a challenge because we're such disparate communities in academia and governments. So yes, I implore folks to try and make that authenticity break boundaries.
Perfect. All right. And then final question here. When might we expect number 3 and 4? We love number 1 and number 2. When are 3 and 4 coming our way?
I assume you're talking about films, because I'm not having any more children. No way.
Oh, no.
My second child doesn't sleep. The next 2 films, the episode 3 where I'm running around the desert, that's sort of 2/3 done, half done. That's in pretty good shape. They'll be out to you they should be out to you by March next year. So that's the plan. I'm contracted to YouTube at the moment to have a certain amount of content out. So we're flapping around here trying to get stuff done. So it's not too far away. So I hope to get them to you by March next year.
Excellent. Okay, and at the end here, after you leave, we are going to make a plug for the eDNA piece that comes up in Bad River 2. So we'll mention that toward the end here. But thanks so much, Beau, for attending with us and for passing along your email address. Not a lot of filmmakers will make that offer, so thanks for that. And to those attendees, please take advantage of that. Yeah, let's all do our part. Thanks so much for attending today, Beau, and we wish you the best.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your webinar, and yeah, good luck in your pursuits.
Sounds good. Appreciate it. All right, Brad, if you want to start sharing your screen, we'll turn the time over to you, and then we'll come back for a bit of a discussion about some of the plastic pollution and some of the episodes that you've done on your Ocean Protect podcast.
Look, and full on tough act to follow, has to be said, but I will do my best. And thank you for everyone who's attending. My goodness, a great turnout and a lot of familiar names I can see. So thank you so much for your time and energy today. Look, I'm going to do a very quick preso, but I'm keen to dive into the chat. I just want to start with this graph. It basically shows a graph of plastic production over time. And I show this for a couple of reasons. Number one, the amount of plastics we're producing and consuming is dramatically increasing. Everyone knows plastic pollution is a big problem, but we can't turn this ship around. We can't, all the cleanup initiatives and technological innovations are not going to solve the plastic pollution crisis or protect our rivers from plastic pollution if we keep on producing and consuming it. And that is consistent for a whole bunch of resources, whether it's fossil fuels or fashion. The more we consume, the more we produce. We're just making a rod for our own back. So that has to change for any conversation around protecting our river systems. Also, what we do on our land and in our catchments invariably impacts on our rivers and waterways and oceans. And look, when rain falls on our land environments, it washes a whole bunch of contamination pollutants into our rivers and oceans and waterways. And stormwater is the number one cause of plastic pollution in our rivers and oceans, but it's also the number one cause of ecological degradation in our urban waterways. And it's not just plastic; it's not just litter, the visible pollutants. There's a whole bunch of pollutants that come off our land environments, basically because of humans that wash into our river systems. And it's hard to assess the impacts of those. So whether it's PFAS or heavy metals or mud, any one of those contaminants can cause a whole bunch of dramas. But if you mix those contaminants together, the impacts are really hard to assess, but fundamentally they cannot be good at all. And it's, like I said, it's often pollutants that you can't even see. So a truth bomb that I like to drop is around vehicle tire wear and tear. Bizarrely, it's the number one source of primary microplastics in our oceans, and it's the average car tire roughly loses about 1 kilo of weight over its lifetime. Times that by 4 on each car, times that by how many cars there are on the planet. It's a lot of vehicle tire wear and tear running off into our rivers and oceans, etc. And that vehicle tire wear and tear isn't just a natural rubber, it's a chemical cocktail of a whole bunch of very nasty pollutants, which are great to protect ourselves when we're driving around, but terrible when they enter the rivers and waterways. One chemical, as an example, is 6-PPD, which breaks down into 6-PB quinone, which has been shown fundamentally to cause massive fish kills of meter-long coho salmon in Puget Sound in Northwest America, just as one chemical. Again, you combine that with everything else that washes into our rivers, it causes all sorts of dramas. But in more positive news, Craig's asked me to share some what he termed low-hanging fruit to better protect our rivers. So here goes, and I recognize I'm just one perspective. I know a lot of people will have a different opinion to me, but this to my mind is my top 5 low-hanging fruit to better protect our rivers. First up, this is a no-brainer. A major source of sediment and mud in our rivers and ocean environments and bays, etc., is construction site sediment-laden runoff. Now, you've probably all driven past a site that looks something like the images on the left, and it has improved over the last 20 years, but it's still woefully inadequate. There was a recent study by Water by Design that showed that showed 40% of construction sites are not complying with bare minimum legislative requirements in terms of erosion sediment control. That is just woefully inadequate. It's better than it used to be, but it's still just horrendous. And it's an issue that we could easily mitigate. Low-hanging fruit. Hire each council, or at least each of the bigger councils, hire a couple of erosion sediment control officers, issue fines for bad sites, which will basically pay for their wages and cause a lot of improvement, I would suspect. But for some reason, regulators are often reluctant to do that, which I don't think is good enough. Second one, and this is more closer to home from me, is just to remove the pollution that is already retained in existing stormwater treatment assets. So the image on the left shows an end-of-line gross pollutant trap, like an underground garbage bin, which intercepts stormwater and captures a whole bunch of pollution. And the image on the right is a gully pit basket. Now, these are integrated into roadside gully pits or similar. And they're really good at capturing pollution. Ocean Protect, we've got about 25,000 of these integrated in Australia. But the key drama with these assets is, whilst we have literally hundreds of thousands of these assets which would cost about several $1 billion, the vast majority of them do not get maintained, i.e. the accumulated pollution in these $1 billion plus worth of assets is not removed. So fundamentally, incoming pollutant loads that these devices could otherwise intercept and stop from entering our rivers and waterways just bypasses the system. So that is not good enough. This is illegal, depending on where you are in Australia. The legislation varies, but fundamentally it is illegal to not clean out these assets. But to the best of my knowledge, the vast majority of regulators do not do anything to enforce that legislation. Again, not good enough, easy to fix. To give you an idea of what we pull out of these assets, so the image on the right I said before was a gully pit basket, and they're just put into gully pits. And there'd be tens of thousands of gully pits around Brisbane, for example. But just to show you what we pull out of them, the image on the left shows what we pulled out of just 8 gully pit baskets. They were in a very stock standard street in Western Sydney for 5 months. So very small number of gully pits, baskets, left in the ground for 5 months. And the key thing the reason I show this is because the vast majority of pollutants that we see, the vast majority of the plastic items that we see in our assets are single-use plastic items. Bags, wrappers, straws, bottles, you name it, single-use items. Now, we would go a long way to help better protect our rivers by just progressively banning and or heavily taxing the production or consumption of these single-use plastics. Now, we are seeing that across Australia, a progressive ban on single-use plastics, but it's nowhere near fast enough and nowhere near widespread enough and not consistent enough. So again, from my mind, this is low-hanging fruit. Banning it or taxing it combined with a whole bunch of education for the public as to why this is important. And the pollutants or the plastic items that you see in our assets are exactly the same as if you've ever done a beach cleanup or a river cleanup. Why? Because our stormwater system is discharging these items straight into our river systems. Now, this one's probably a little bit more controversial, but the science is fundamentally clear. We can't have healthy river systems if we don't have decent vegetation coverage. And the number one cause of deforestation is clearing land for livestock. So fundamentally, you need a lot more land to produce animal products relative to plant-based food items. And so livestock is the number one cause of deforestation, both wherever you are, whether it's Amazon or Australia. Livestock fundamentally is the number one cause of deforestation. It's the number one cause of biodiversity loss. And it is also as per the United Nations here, probably the largest source of water pollution. So how do we fix that? Just eat more plants. So I'm not saying you don't have to necessarily go vegan like me, but if you shift your dietary patterns towards a more plant-rich diet, that would be a very big step that we can all do literally in our next meal to help better protect our waterway environment. Another one, this is my last one. And these are all photos of the Brisbane River, which is where I am. live in Brisbane. So the easiest, a really low-hanging fruit to better protect our rivers is to encourage interaction and engagement. Now in Brisbane, there's a lot of cool ways to do that. You can go kayaking on the river. You can get on your bike and ride the river loop, which is very popular. Or you can just go for a run or a walk along one of the paths, or chill out, have a Sunday afternoon session, and listen to some live music at South Bank. All of these things encourage interaction and engagement, and fundamentally humans are far more likely to protect something that they are engaging or interacting with and are familiar with. Now, often it's hard to go to some river systems, but that's why guys like Beau are so critically important to help share the story of some of these river environments. So that's all I wanted to talk about. I'm happy to pass on the microphone to Craig and open up to some discussions.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I'll give you a chance for a second to read some of the comments that have come in so you can figure out which ones you want to hit. While we're doing that, I will just pop up a reminder that we've just had our 10-year anniversary with the Australian Water School, and there's a little anniversary video if you want to have a watch of that. But really, what I want to focus on here is thinking about how fast time flies. I mean, Joel and I and some of the other admins at the Water School, had these conversations 10 years ago, and we'd get a handful of views here and there. We could not have imagined the almost million views that we've got now for our webinars and the course contents that are out there, and the way that we've been able to interact with you, a whole planet of global professionals. And it's what I guess the reason I want to bring this up is just to think about the last 10 years and where we were 10 years ago, where we are today. Where are we going to be 10 years from now? There's going to be a video, and I'll refer back to this one maybe on that day when we say celebrating 20 years. I hope 10 years from now we're still doing this, still putting content out. Where are we going to be? It's alarming to see what's happening, and to see how climate change has been affecting things with our water resources, and to see some of the innovation, which is really encouraging. Some of the science and the technology that's out there. Where are we going to be 20 years from now? And you all and we all can help shape what we're going to be looking at 20 years from now when we look back on this day and say, geez, well, we've made a lot of progress in the last 10 years, or wow, we really stuffed some things up in that 10-year period. So with that, Brad, have you had a look at some of the comments? I'll just leave it to you to address the ones that have been upvoted the most. A lot of them coming your way. Some of them may be a bit controversial in terms of how we balance things out, but let's not shy away from those either.
That's good balance. Look, fundamentally, what we have at the moment is imbalance. So unless we call out, bullshit, basically, and drive change, we're going to be in the same position we were in 20 years' time as we are now. So, look, I'm not sure if I'm seeing the right ones, but Daniel Deere asked a question, and it's the first one I've seen. Brad, why do you think we always see meat served by default at all water sector events and meetings even now? What you've said is nothing new. The sector talks about net zero, but doesn't even seem to keen to walk the talk. Totally. I was at a conference last week around protecting our waterways. I had to opt in to the vegan option, and equally, I was at a climate change event recently as well. Same deal. It's hypocritical, fundamentally. The classic, if you get on the vegan love wagon, the classic joke is, do you want to hear a joke? A meat eater walks into a climate change conference. So fundamentally, if leaders lead, and if we do want to see change and better protect our waterways environment, I think it's up to the industry to lead by example. And the very least, and it's been shown in science, one of the easiest things you can do is just have the plant-based option as the default option. And most times people will choose that option instead of chowing down on a beef sandwich. Cherie asks, what about plastic stickers on fruit? They should be banned. Of course they should be. There's, I think, as was just talked about on, Daniel talks about on the ABC War and Waste, there are alternatives. I think that you can imprint a food coloring stamp on food items, which works really well, and don't have plastic stickers anymore. Which is, why don't we do it? It's fundamentally pretty easy. Carlos asks, what happens when the fines issued for non-erosion sediment control compliance are cheaper than implementing proper erosion sediment control? I see a political challenge with increasing fines, as this could be played as affecting housing affordability by the opposition. What are your thoughts? Yeah, fundamentally, I was having this conversation just last week at an erosion control conference. It is sometimes cheaper to just break the law than it is to actually put in decent erosion sediment control practices. Fundamentally, the fines are not sufficient to encourage better practice. Is it politically unpopular? No. Everyone wants to live in areas with nice and clean waterways that aren't full of mud. So, and whilst the polluter doesn't pay for that mud discharge from their site, everyone else pays. So the inbuilt cost is essentially paid by everyone, and that shouldn't be popular at all.
Sounds good. One of the questions came up, as we watch these charts go up and up and up, if population is going up and up and up, and plastic is going up at the same rate, then isn't our per capita use holding steady? I don't think so, but any thoughts on that?
No, look, I haven't presented that figure, but if you jump on our world in data, I'm sure you'll be able to find a graph to show that no, per capita consumption of plastics, amongst a whole bunch of other items, is increasing.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll just give you a chance then to look at the most upvoted questions here.
Yeah, there's a couple. One anonymous asks about, is there any evidence or research to show the impacts of, urbanization? So basically reducing the imperviousness of the catchment. And look, there's a lot of data and research around this, basically showing that when you increase imperviousness in a land environment, you dramatically increase the frequency and volume of flows. And that is a major cause of ecological degradation in our waterways. So when you got more frequent and voluminous flows and higher speed flows, you basically cause a whole bunch of erosion and scour, which changes the channel form, which means a lot of your riparian vegetation is lost. Now, on the topic of riparian vegetation, we haven't really covered this, but I'm happy to talk about it. But riparian vegetation has a whole bunch of benefits: shading, pollution removal, slowing down of flows, temperature control, etc., habitat. And when we lose that riparian vegetation coverage, we lose all those benefits. And a key reason for that lost riparian vegetation coverage is just the increased frequency and volume of flows, whether it's from imperviousness, like putting down roads, car parks, buildings, etc., or just knocking down trees. More or less same result: increased frequency and volume of flows, which damages our waterways and fundamentally damages our river systems. There was a question around similar around erosion sediment control. The enforcement of fines for ESC failures is not being followed through by local government. Yeah. What is the recommendation for getting suitable training or guaranteeing better erosion sediment control practice? So, yeah, look, from my perspective, each local government, at least of a decent size, should have at least one or two officers going around and enforcing those requirements. Now, if I park my car in the main street of Brisbane, I'll give myself 5 minutes before I get a $200 fine and probably get my car towed. Now, why is that not the case if I deposit a ton or more of dirt into the waterway environment? Should be the same. Doesn't happen. So local governments should be prioritizing this. And if they're not willing to, state government needs to step in and actually say, why aren't you doing a better job? So I'm getting passionate here, Craig. You got me riled up.
No, that's good. And again, what we'll do is we'll give you some resources here. We've got links to these recordings, to Beau's videos, including the podcast, the Ocean Protect podcast. Again, with the idea that bad rivers become bad oceans. So garbage without borders. Have a look at this, and then we've got links to some of the definitions around riparianism. And again, I want the next 10 years. When we look back on this day 10 years from now, I want to know, I'll be close to retirement at that point. I want to know that I've done all I can to help rivers. That's my chosen field. Riparian, meaning rivers, that's what I picked. That's what I've spent 25, 30 years, as much time and effort as I put into raising kids, I've put into this career to try to help rivers be a better place and to protect people from rivers and to protect rivers from us, from people. So here are 3 voices that you heard today from Perth, from Victoria, from Queensland, so from all sides of Australia. But what about the rest of the world? We've got a global presence here. And by the time people watch these YouTube views, some of them it's 50,000 people that have seen some of the YouTube videos we've put out. Here we are looking at our perspective of the world here from Australia. Yes, it looks upside down to the rest of the world, but we're spread all around. And one of the things that I've put out here as well on one of my websites, I'm really into flying. That's been my passion. My dad's a pilot. I've been, always interested in that. And 100 years ago, next year, was the first flight around the world. First time anybody went all the way around the world. And you look at all these stops they took, and they took photos along the way. And some of these photos, because they were in seaplanes, a lot of these photos are along waterways, and you can see glaciers in the background, things like that. What I'd like to do, and this is just an idea off the top of my head, I've always wanted to follow this and retrace this journey. Now, it would take 6 months and more travel than I could possibly do. I can't do this myself. But what about you, this global community? Can we crowdsource this? And on the 100th anniversary of each stop along the way, let's find these photos. Let's take these photos and let's see what difference has been made. What's happened in 100 years? 100 years that, is it progress? Is it regress? What's happened over the last 100 years? I would like to find each of these spots. We got people all around the world watching these webinars, attending our courses. If you're anywhere near here on the 100th anniversary, take a photo that's the same. I'm going to publish all these photos that they took and see if we can match those. And one of the things I wanted to mention is 100 years ago, the Spree River in Berlin, the one that I talked about, that was, it wasn't just the border issues. It was polluted. They closed it to swimming. In 1925, they closed it to swimming. It was closed for almost 100 years. They now have opened it up. There are things we can do. And I don't know if you jump in many of the rivers around the world and take a swim, but that's what Brad was talking about and what Beau was talking about. Why do we have pools and clean and chlorine next to these rivers that we could just jump in and swim in? Why haven't we cleaned these up? Why haven't we cleaned up our act? Well, here's one chance that we've got, or one example of a river that has been largely cleaned up, and they test this before the swimmers go in. And 100 years of progress here has resulted in a swimmable river. So there are some things that we can do. Please do fill out the polls at the end. Help us steer the content of our webinars, our courses, the content that we have going forward. If you want to see more of this, people like Beau, come on, let us know. Let us know. Is this something you want to see more of? Do you want to see more technical content? This is our passion. This is what we do. I hope you sense that. I hope when you hear Brad talk and he says, hey, I'm getting a little bit passionate here, I want that. I want to feel that passion. I'm passionate about this as well. Riparianism is my chosen field. I want to make it something good. That's why I spent my $10 and redefined it. And now if you Google it, 5 years ago, I had 13 subscribers. And I was like, who am I when I buy this little $10 definition? And then I just Googled it the other day and it's like, well, I've just redefined it. Who am I? I just redefined a word. I own that word. So riparianism, from now on, when you Google it, it's my definition. It's our definition, our collective definition. We are breaking down these borders. We don't want to see rivers managed in a way, whether it's a mining company that owns a river and can just dump tailings into it, or whether it's a government that owns a river and says, I'm going to withdraw all this and the downstream water owners don't get anything. I want to get rid of those boundaries. I want to tear down those walls, just like the Berlin Wall was torn down, the wall that I hated and despised when I used to cross that border with the military officers. And when I saw that on the side, that memorial to that Turkish boy who suffered as a result of the complacency and the inability to act because of these political ramifications that are around a lot of our rivers today. So that's my final plug. Brad, let's hear a little final go-to message from you to bring it home for us. What are your closing remarks before we close it up today?
I'll look to the topic of the swimmable rivers. I just think our baseline understanding of our rivers is warped. I was having a chat with Captain Peter Hammerstedt from Sea Shepherd, who's the guy that basically rams the whaling ships and illegal fishing vessels, which is awesome. And he was telling me a story about how back in the days of Marcus Aurelius, one of the popular fishing techniques was to basically just drop a plank with spikes coming out of it, and then you just drop that plank into the ocean and pull it out, and it'd be full of fish. So the life within our oceans and our river systems, historically, pre-industrial European, etc., was off the charts. I think our impression of what is normal is just so warped by what we are currently experiencing. And our river systems are they are resilient. They can recover. They just need to be given a chance. And there's a whole bunch of things that we can do to help better protect our river systems. And we should do those things.
Well, thanks for that take-home message. Please join us for future content that we'll be bringing out. Today was a little bit of a platform, soapbox for us, an idea, a little bit of venting, but also a little bit of storytelling. And I hope, brought you one of the best storytellers on the planet. And I hope you get to watch some of Beau's videos. And do tune in for Brad's podcasts. They come at you, weekly, Brad? How often?
Every fortnight.
Yeah. Every fortnight. Okay, that's every 2 weeks for the Americans out there who don't understand the term fortnight. All right. So with that, thank you so much for being with us today. Thanks to all the attendees. Thanks for helping us be able to do what we do. We love it, and we hope you get something out of this as well and help make the world a better place and help advance the cause of the newly redefined riparianism. With that, we'll see you later next time on the Australian.